Hello, and welcome to the Catching the Octopus podcast. Here, we will explore how connecting inward gives us an advantage outward. We openly talk about the obstacles and challenges and difficulties that life throws our way and how they become moments of gratitude and things that can benefit us when we look back on our lives. I'm your host, Naomi Hurley, and it is my mission to bring you top quality guests that will share with you openly their obstacles and also the techniques they use to go inward that strengthens the way that they serve themselves and others at the highest level. Thank you for joining. Let's get started. Thank you for joining us today in this episode of the Catching the Octopus podcast. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Paula Smith. Now, Dr. Paula Smith is an expert in powerful presenting and leadership communication. So, Dr. Paula Smith, welcome.
Thank you, and thanks for inviting me to come along.
Oh, I'm excited to have a chat with you. But before we get into that, I just wonder, can you give us a bit of an introduction about yourself? What do you do?
Yeah, certainly. So I think this is my 38th year in business. I'm starting to feel a bit old now, but I still totally love what I do. So I work with a lot of large organisations and government departments, helping their key people with their presenting skills and their leadership development. But I also run public programs as well. Like one of my signature programs is called Present with Impact, and I run that every single month at my property in the Perth Hills. And I also run a program called Neuro Presenting, which is a premier presenting program, which is presenting with the brain in mind, which is a 3-day immersion. So sort of presenting and leadership is really what I do. And because I've been around for quite a long time, I also find myself doing a lot of coaching, whether that's private coaching in presenting or executive development. And as being a business owner for the last 30 plus years, I do some business coaching as well, especially with those businesses who want to use speaking as a marketing strategy to grow their business and amplify their brands, or for those businesses who maybe want to start like a training or an information or a speaking business. They tend to find me as well. So that's a little bit about my world. I live up here in the beautiful Perth Hills and based in Perth pretty much my entire life. And that's a little bit about me. Oh, I do actually have a husband, a couple of kids, and the love of my life, Banjo, the border collie.
Beautiful. Oh, my daughter's just started a dog washing business, and I love the weekends now. Like, she's only 10, but just dogs are amazing, aren't they? They just bring you so much joy.
That's wonderful. I was just thinking what a great way to start an entrepreneurial spirit. I think my first business, I was about the same age, and I ran puppet shows for the local kids. Cool. I charged them, it was quite a while ago, it was 20 cents a person, because I really wanted to save up enough money to go to the Royal Show. So, and then when my mum found out that I was charging all my friends, she made me give all the money back and said I was profiteering from my friends. She did not appreciate my entrepreneurial spirit.
I think that's really interesting, isn't it? Because I think that you do have a particular mindset being an entrepreneur, and it is breaking down some of those belief systems that we're taught as kids to come into that space. And that would be the same as with presenting, wouldn't it? People would come in and have to break down some of those belief systems.
Oh, absolutely. Nobody was born terrified about presenting.
Yeah.
And yet nobody was born with the skills either. But people come along and think that that person is a natural, powerful presenter. No, they're not. They've had some training. Yeah. And when someone says, I've always been terrified, you haven't always been terrified. Nobody was born terrified about speaking. It's all learnt behaviour. So what part of their past, has caused them to be nervous about standing up in front of an audience? Look, sometimes it is a little bit, they might be an introvert. It is a little bit about, personality as well, but it's definitely skill-based. And when people have the skills, they're much more confident to use those skills.
So what would you say would be 3 elements that all presenters would need in a presentation to be able to influence their audience the way they're...
Oh, only 3. So I have in my
as many as you want, but we'll start with 3.
3 is probably enough, for a podcast. So in my second book, it's called 52 Powerful Presentation Principles. So there's actually 52.
Wow.
So I know, right? And never to be used in a single presentation. You'll exhaust yourself as well as your audience. So, but the 3 I think that's really mindful for people to remember is good old Aristotle, a Greek philosopher, said more than 2,000 years ago that you need three things to influence others.
Yep.
And those three things to influence others should appear in every single presentation. And that is ethos, pathos, and logos. And if you've never heard of those things before, so ethos is people are more likely to be influenced by people who have authority or perceived credibility and of a good character as well. So a lot of the times presenters forget to establish that authority or to build rapport with the audience. So they build up that trust and authority and credibility right from the start. When you have that, you have the audience in the palm of your hands.
Mm.
Pathos is that appealing to emotion. And emotion trumps logic. So a lot of presenters think that they have to get up there and bombard them with a million PowerPoints on every slide, and they're there to give information, but they're actually not. They're there to inspire people to move into action or to change their behavior. And you inspire people by sharing stories and appealing to their emotions. We're more emotive in our decision making than anyone probably is aware of.
Yeah.
However, we still want the logos, which is the logic. We still want the data. We still want the facts. So
Yep.
if you put those three things into a presentation, you're much more likely to influence the audience into changing their behavior, which ultimately a powerful presentation is really about. The end result is inspiring the audience to change their behavior.
Yeah, and I love that inspiration and inspiring people to change their behavior. And I suppose my key element of the way I do that is by creating curiosity. And that probably fits in a little bit with the pathos, probably with all three of them, to be honest, understanding the person, connecting with them emotionally, and then giving them some logic to really get their mind to go, oh, maybe I don't know everything.
Yeah, and it's funny you said the word curiosity. So curiosity, when people are curious, they get a rush of dopamine, which is a neurotransmitter in the brain, and it causes them to pay attention.
Mm.
So when we're opening a presentation, for instance, you've got to incite a bit of curiosity and get attention from the moment that we're on, from our very first words. So our audience get that beautiful rush of dopamine.
Yeah, and it's a fine line as well between coming out and being really over the top and really connecting with your audience, isn't it? I know I've been to many presentations and the person's come out and I'm like, oh, they're a bit weird. But 5 minutes in, I'm enthralled by their presentation. So that first element is really important to get that connection right, isn't it?
And right from the start, not 5 minutes in.
Yeah.
And there's a structure and a framework. So like when I work with my clients, to make sure that they do build rapport from the moment that they're standing on stage, that they're not waiting 5 or 10 minutes in. Because as you know, first impressions can sometimes be lasting. But it's
Yes.
also a cultural thing as well. Yeah, especially for an Australian audience, we have this thing called the tall poppy syndrome, which
Yes.
maybe many of your listeners know about the tall poppy syndrome. We really like to back the underdog, and we don't like people to be big noting themselves and telling them how good they are. So, however, that's just in our culture. So in other cultures, and people can come on stage and be big and powerful and a real big personality right from the start, and people love them for it. So
Yeah.
sometimes can be a cultural thing as well.
So how would you suggest, or how do you coach people through in opening a presentation? What would be the key way to do that?
Well, most times you'll go into a presentation, and when I use the term presentation, I use that term quite loosely as well, because it could
Yeah.
be facilitating a meeting, could be running a workshop, could be doing a keynote or even a TEDx talk as well.
Yeah.
So a presentation, the typical way people would open like a training course or a presentation or a meeting would say, like, hello, everyone, my name is Paula and welcome to Presentation Skills. Like, oh, yawn, yawn, yawn. It doesn't gonna get that rush of dopamine, and no one's really paying attention either. Now, it's important for you to introduce yourself and say all those niceties, but never at the beginning of a presentation. So
Yeah.
the opening should incite curiosity and get attention. And
Mm.
you can use, I'll just give you a couple of examples for story. You're going to start with a story.
Yep.
Never say, I'm going to tell you a story, though. You just go straight into the story.
Yep.
In fact, storytelling, I did my entire master's thesis actually in storytelling in a business context. So
Right.
stories are one of the most powerful ways to open a presentation, and also threaded throughout presentations. It's
Mm.
good for memory. It's good for attention. It's good for curiosity as well. So
Mm.
really, really powerful way. Even proverbs and quotes are, really great to open a presentation. Someone
Yep.
once said to me, Paul, I don't want to open up with a really cheesy quote. And I go, well, don't open up with a cheesy one then. Choose a really good one.
Yeah.
So, but as long as they're relevant, like to the presentation as well, starting with a statistic, for instance,
Yeah.
is another way. And it doesn't even have to be words. Sometimes you can show an image on a screen. It can be the beginning of a video. It might be an action that you take. But don't ever start with, hello, I'm Paula and welcome to presentation skills. So
Yes.
no one's really paying attention, and it's not a powerful way to open a presentation. There's
Yeah.
also this thing called the law of primacy and recency. And the
Mm-hmm.
law of primacy and recency suggests that our brains will remember the first and the last things that we hear or see. So we
Yeah.
really want to make those moments matter.
Yeah, look, I do a fair bit around biases and those shortcuts, the schemas and heuristics our brains do. And it's really important to understand those from a leadership perspective, but also in presentations, right? Because you can then prime the audience to be where they need to be to receive your information more clearly and be more receptive.
You hit the nail on the head when you said priming.
Yeah.
So in a really good solid presentation structure, we do strategies to prime our audience,
Yeah.
and we can't miss them out. We can't go straight into the information, straight into the presentation. We have to prime their brain so they're ready to receive the information.
Yeah, definitely. And how many different, I mean, I know there's millions of different ways to prime, but kind of how many do you cover when you're talking with people? What are the key primes that you would probably cover?
Well, it's built into a structure. So before we getting into basically information, there's almost like 4 steps, and
Yeah.
probably don't have enough time to go through them all to
No.
today.
Yeah.
But even just suggesting, and you may be thinking this
Yes.
is priming them,
Yes.
or this might be a bit controversial today. Yeah, but when I get to that part, I'd love you to be a little bit more curious instead of reacting.
Yes.
Language like that throughout your presentation is they don't realize it, but you're priming them. So when they do think that, they went, oh, Paula said I've got to be curious now and write something down instead of being reactive. So
Yeah.
you're priming them for what's to come. You never want to tell them how they're going to think. So it'll be, your language will be like, you may be thinking this, or, when this happens, you could be thinking this.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. And I tend to do that with the presentations and the programs that I deliver is, trying to read the room as well. If I go into this space of an energy perspective and then getting into that, if you say a particular word, even if everyone's faces stay the same, you can still feel the energy change in the room. You're like, okay, I'm not going to go full blown hippie with this group, right? Or I'm going to stay more logical with this group, or this group needs more emotion. And so there's a lot of reading the room as well, isn't there, for doing a good presentation?
Yeah, and you can ask some key questions also at the beginning of your presentation, and they just think you're building rapport, but some of those key questions gives a bit of an idea, of the general energy of the audience. I mean, they're all going to process and receive information very differently. They're all, they're a group made up of, lots of different personalities as well. But yeah, you can certainly ask some key questions to sort of gauge a little bit about how things are going to be receiving and being received, I should say.
Yeah.
And also when you're talking about energy as well, it's like the more you train or the more you're in front of an audience, you create and you develop this expanded awareness. It's a bit like teachers, the
Yes.
good old saying that teachers have eyes in the back of their head. They really do.
Yeah.
They've created and developed this expanded awareness so that they know everything that's going on in a single classroom at any one time because they've developed it.
Yeah, especially when I started, I'm probably not fighting nerves as much now, but when I started doing this, I had some key elements I would do to calm my nerves. So I know how important the words are in our head and what that does. So one of mine was changing I'm nervous to I'm excited, right? Because it's the same feeling in the body, but in insight's a different response. But I found once I mastered that, great, I could get up and I wasn't nervous. But about a minute in, usually, sometimes 30 seconds if I did it well, I would feel the whole room just projecting at me. I'd look, everyone how was eyeballing me and the energy was really intense. That's when I would get nervous. And I've mastered that a bit more now. But is there anything that you would just do, maybe one tip for someone that does have nerves when they're presenting?
Yeah, now it's interesting you said, 30 seconds in. A lot of the people that I work with said, oh, I'm really good after 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And I go, you've got to be good from the first second, not
Yeah.
5 minutes in.
Yeah.
And there's many strategies, to get on top of your nerves and work with your nerves. It's not at the fight, with your nerves as well. We
Yeah.
have this thing in our brain called the amygdala,
Yeah.
and when it basically hijacks us, and it's that response to that, fight, flight, or freeze. And
Yeah.
a lot of the times when we get this amygdala hijack is our executive brain can't think straight. So, and it's our response to fear. So if we don't get our nerves under control before we actually step on stage, we could experience this amygdala hijack, but we get up on stage and we go, far out, who are all these people and what is my name?
Yes.
Our executive thinking just goes out the window. So we do a lot of strategies way before they step on stage. It's not the 5 minutes before, it's not the half an hour before, it's from the moment they get their presentation. So, and it's practicing sort of being uncomfortable or practicing being within fear and sitting with fear and getting our bodies under control so we can actually be more in control of our emotions, you know, when fear sort of hits us. And there's, you know, there's other normal strategies that you hear people talk about, you know, when it comes to, you know, breathing and slowing down, you know, all those type of things, visualization, you know, Dr. Amy Cuddy's power pose. And so, there's lots of different strategies, but it's depending the person I'm working with as well. Most people have healthy nerves, just healthy nerves. And some people I work with have glossophobia, and glossophobia is actually the technical term for that phobia, that really deep fear of public speaking. And that requires a different strategy altogether.
If you're enjoying this podcast and you want Naomi or any of her guests featured on your podcast or as a keynote speaker at your next event, you'll find their contact details included in the show notes. If you'd like to learn more about how you can work with Naomi individually or as part of your strategy to improve leadership in your business, then review the courses, offers and services at getupandgroconsulting.com.au.
Yeah. I think the key words that popped out for me in there was like making the unfamiliar familiar. And I think that goes just even beyond presenting, doesn't it? Even in leadership and life, like that's just a really key tool that we can use.
Yeah, it's amazing in most of my programs. We say it's a powerful presenting or communication program, but it's like, but every single one of these strategies that I'm talking about today and going through today, you can use in your normal life because it's really about how we connect with others. It's about how we build rapport with others. It's about how we influence others. And it doesn't matter whether it's from the front of the room, which is obviously my niche, but it works in, you know, in persuading our kids to empty the dishwasher.
Yes.
So once you learn a little bit more about human behavior and influence, you can learn it in use it and learn it obviously, and throughout every area of your life.
Yeah. And I think people have always been my passion through my whole life, even from when I was younger, you know, from when I was a kid. So I remember when I was really young, people asked me what I was going to do. I said, I want to be a doctor. And I haven't actually gone into the medical field, but I do a lot of healing for people, right? Like physical work in a healing space, but also just helping leaders grow is healing too. And so helping people in that presenting space, there's some healing around that as well, isn't there?
Absolutely. And you can still be a doctor. You can still do your PhD in your world.
Yes.
You just don't have to be a medical doctor. You can be a doctor of anything that you want to study and research in. So there's still time, Naomi, for you to have that doctor hat.
Well, I'm 3/4 away through my master's, so it may be on the cards at some point. So
once you've got that done, you go, no more. I'm all studied out. And then next minute you go, I wonder if I should start my PhD. So yeah, it's not over yet.
Yeah, I reckon that'll happen to me because I am telling everyone if I go to study again, just slap me. But yeah, I don't know. So I've got some questions that I ask all of my guests when they come onto the podcast. And it's more about, so I believe, and we spoke about this before we actually jumped on and started recording, that, you know, everything in life is purposeful. So sometimes we have some big obstacles, but they can be there sometimes to help us connect inward more, right? And get to know ourselves better. So do you have, or could you share with us like the biggest obstacle that you've had to overcome and how that strengthened your connection inward?
Yeah, so biggest obstacles, I suppose being a business owner and also a mum. I think we talked about this before we started recording of that juggle. It's probably my biggest obstacle, but also my biggest love. I'm a mum first. I've always been a mum first.
Yeah.
And but I'm also been a very driven career person and business person as well. And many times that has been an obstacle to me wanting to achieve my things in business, but it's definitely obstacle. It's never been a stop barrier. It's like, how will I navigate this? And somebody wants me to jump on a plane and go and speak at a conference for 3 days, however, and I've got a couple of kids at home, how will I navigate this? So, but it's really sort of just tapping back into what my values are, what's really important to me, how can I make it work, but still make sure that my kids don't suffer in the process, but I still want to be able to fulfill my own goals as well. So that's always sort of been an obstacle, but an obstacle to be navigated rather than I can't do this. It's definitely a navigation.
Yeah. And I love that, because sometimes, that we don't realize as well what we're modeling to our kids. So
Yes.
sometimes that project that we do take, that we go and do, that really fills our soul, on one hand, we're like, oh, should I really leave the kids for this? And then on the other hand, the kids are saying, oh, we're allowed to go and follow our dreams. All right. We're allowed to be happy and do things that make us and bring us joy.
Yeah, and it was really interesting because my mum was a stay-at-home mum. So
Yeah.
she was smart, she was clever, and but she lived, through her children. She was the best mum in the world. So
Yeah.
when, some of my other friends would go home to empty houses, I went home to bake cookies in the afternoon.
Yeah.
So and I knew how important that was. Not at the time. Not at the time. It was like,
No.
oh, you don't appreciate, my mum's always home.
Yeah.
But as I became a parent myself, I go, wow, my mum made so many sacrifices. So that there was somebody home. I was never alone. I was never feeling lonely. My mum was always there for me, and my dad, of course, but mum was obviously the more of the driver in that era. So I really wanted to be that person for my own children. However, I didn't really know my mum as a person, and I know she did compromise what she wanted to be there for her kids, and I appreciate that from the bottom of my heart. But I also wish that she could have actually achieved some of her own personal goals, because it is about modeling that for your own children. So when my children are growing up now, I mean, they're 32 and 29 and 17 now. So they've had this whole life of, watching mum sort of achieve her own goals, but trying really, really hard to be there for them as well. And I think being there, even though they don't appreciate it until they're going to be a parent as well.
Of course.
And but being there and giving them time is something that's just so valuable for them.
Yeah, most definitely. And, the clients that I see in the individual space, when it comes to things like trauma, it's not always the event that causes the trauma. It's that lack of support or that lack of person or someone to rely on afterwards. And so I love how you say being there for them, because sometimes it's just presence, isn't it? That's just all they need.
Yeah, it's like my youngest at the moment, she's in year 12, so she's got exams coming up. And I said, put your exam, timetable on my fridge. And she's going, but why? So, I'm basically like going to look at my schedule to say, like, I'm just not going to schedule. I'm not going to schedule any travel around there, even if I'm just in the kitchen baking, which I really don't do a lot. So she may think that's a bit weird, but I just want to be present, just home, just in case she needs, just some additional support, or she's going to have some tantrums, or she wants someone to take her out for breakfast in the morning. Yeah, so just those little things about being there. And I think and not just for women, I think it's, for men as well, it's a parenting thing.
Yes.
And sometimes we put work first.
Yeah.
And I think, we should be putting, maybe, if we can, I know some people are not always fortunate enough to be in a position to do that. But, if we can put our families first and ourselves first and our kids first, and maybe put work a little bit second.
Yeah.
And and then maybe everybody, including our kids, might be a little bit happier.
Maybe. So, also, like with life, I think that a lot of the challenges that we have, and we kind of spoke about this before we came on as well, but the challenges we have at the time feel ick, and they're not great, they're not pleasant, but later on they can be really quite beneficial, and we can have gratitude for them. Do you have a challenge you might be able to share with us in your life that might have been terrible at the time, but now you're grateful for it? And how did that become of benefit to you?
Oh, probably have so many. Life is full of challenges, isn't it? It's our response to those challenges, I think, that matters. Probably, if I can think of maybe a couple over the last few years, especially on a business perspective, I fractured my back in a skiing accident about 7 years ago now. and which was horrendous, at the time.
Yeah.
And but it certainly caused me to stop my active life, because I was very busy again, busy with kids and life and business, etc. So I had to stop a lot of things. But it also made me realize the importance of my health. So
Yeah.
because when you don't have your health, you don't really have anything.
Mhm.
So although I did replace my running at that point with red wine and chocolate, and the health benefits weren't quite the same. I had to stop that real quick as the
Yeah,
kilos went on. But it really did make me slow down, because I had to. And so it was a little bit of a wake-up call to say, yes, I fractured my back. This is terrible. However, I certainly slowed down, and it gave me time to really think about what I wanted my business to look like, what I wanted my priorities to look like, etc. And exactly the same when COVID hit.
Yeah.
And you were probably the same in your business. I worked so hard to fill my calendar with, keynotes and training and coaching. And next minute, every single phone call and email was, I'm so sorry, Paula, this has to be cancelled.
Yeah.
And so the, 37 plus years of building this business and this beautiful full calendar got wiped out overnight.
Yeah.
And I was going, oh, goodness, I don't think I have a business anymore. COVID has just wiped it off. But I only had to sit in that for a moment, and I go, well, of course I still have a business, but it just has to be different now.
Yep.
So obviously I had to sit in that grief for a little while and, have a few tantrums. And but then pretty quick smart, I go, I've survived in business this long. This is just a challenge. So my business just looked a little bit different for a while. I always said, I can't do presentation skills online. And it's not the same. I can't do this. Well, guess what? I was now running full day classes and half day workshops online. And that's continued way past COVID.
Yeah.
I started giving myself time to film. So you might see the filming equipment behind me.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time filming courses, and they're still selling online today, years later. So one of the biggest challenges of my career ended up creating so many more opportunities for me that has changed the way, or it hasn't changed my expertise, but it's changed the way that I deliver those expertise for clients now. And now I have more of a global presence and a global audience, not just in little old Perth.
Yeah. And I think that sometimes if we have that desire to serve and it's strong enough and our why is strong enough, then you'll find ways to adapt, won't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And it was a really tough time for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But it is the ones who jumped up as quickly as they could. And I know that word was really annoying at the time, pivot. That was the buzzword at the time.
Pivoting,
It became a bit annoying, but that's exactly what we had to do. And the business owners that, that pivoted quite quickly are the ones that survived as well. But my heart breaks for some of these businesses who just didn't have that opportunity to pivot, especially those hospitality venues, and some of those other businesses that it just wrecked their business, and they've never recovered from it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it is a huge shame. But I suppose the thing as well is there are, the 3 C's, or the 3 laws, is the law of cycles, the law of change, and the law of consequence. So we're guaranteed that there's going to be cycles in business, in life, in seasons. We're also guaranteed that things are going to change. Things won't be the same tomorrow as what they are today. And then there's consequences to the decisions and actions we take. So, I suppose, yes, it was sad, but I think that's part of the process as well, of one day, hopefully they look back and go, gee, that was the best thing for me because it pushed me into this thing I loved, or it helped me go in and pursue this a little bit more, and having that gratitude in that space.
Yeah, I love that. I love those, 3 C's. And there is consequences to every decision that we make. And sometimes those consequences are wonderful and others not so wonderful. But life will always be full of challenges. And I guess it's our attitude to those challenges that makes the difference.
Maybe I'll add in the 4th C, and there's always going to be challenges. I should do that. Thank you. I think I might do.
What, a 4th C?
The 4th C. Hidden C. So I think most of the people I've met in business, in leadership, and in life through my personal clients as well, I think the ones that have that ability to bounce back, have resilience, pivot, all those sorts of things, they do work and they have connections with themselves. So whether it's an intuitive connection or whether it's just something that really fills their soul. Do you have any daily, weekly, or monthly practices that you do that create that connection or strengthen that connection with self?
Look, I think personal development is something that's so underrated. And a lot of people who are on this personal development journey are the ones who keep developing, and the ones who said they don't need it are the ones who sometimes really need it.
Yes, yes.
You're probably experiencing that yourself.
Oh, yeah.
And so I think the more we know ourselves, the more we know, our triggers, the more we understand ourselves at a deeper level. And I think it helps us to, get through those challenges. And when we talk about resilience as well, I think it's a muscle that gets built. I think if you've never had anything bad that's ever happened to your life, you've never had that opportunity to get out of it.
Yes.
So I think, like the people who have had sometimes, extra challenges in their life or some tough times, really building that resilience muscle. But when it comes to rituals, so that was your question, is I have some rituals, like I walk with my girlfriends every Sunday morning.
Yeah, lovely.
Yeah, and I mentioned to you earlier, I live in the Perth Hills, so I'm surrounded by nature. So I'm in my studio here at the moment, but I look out the window and we're on acres, so there's beautiful trees everywhere. So it's a beautiful setting to be in, very calming setting. I walk my dog every single morning at 5:30. Here's my alarm clock.
Yes.
So I get up every morning. And on the days that I don't really want it, because he doesn't take no for an answer.
Yeah.
So just that, that morning ritual, just to get my head in that space. But definitely the time with my girlfriends on a Sunday morning, we walk on what's called a bridal trail. We have breakfast together. We unpack our week together. It's just so precious. So I don't know if you call that a ritual, but it's certainly those activities, that we do all the time really make an impact to our mindset.
Yeah, definitely. No, I love those. And I think I love the word ritual, but it's been tainted so much in a lot of people's minds. But you're right. A ritual is just something, a behavior that we have, or some sort of repetitive thing that we do at a certain particular time or a certain particular space. So, and I love that the love of your life is the person or the animal that you get to spend the first moments of the day with.
I know, right? Yeah. I should create some more of these rituals with my husband, shouldn't I? And my children. I do have one of those as well. Yeah, his name is Darren. And so, but he doesn't like to get out of bed at 5:30 in the morning. So occasionally he does, but I'm sure he walks with his eyes half closed as we're walking. We go down to south, quite often as well. And we have rituals when we go away together as a couple, where we do get up and walk on the beach, and every single morning early, and we do it every night that we're down there as well.
Yeah.
So so I think creating rituals, with yourself as well, with your dogs, and with different people in your life, I think matter as well.
Yeah, definitely. Most definitely. So, what if people wanted to find you or, had work with you, what's the best way of them trying to get a hold of you?
I'm really easy to find. If you just Google Paula Smith or Dr. Paula Smith, you'll generally find me.
Yeah.
Or go straight to my website, which is paulasmith.com.au. And I'm a bit old school. My phone number's there. They can ring me. I actually answer the phone, and if I can't answer the phone, leave a message and I'll get straight back to them. But yeah, send me an email, pick up the phone, and if you need any help with either your presentation skills, coaching, or if you're an organisation listening in and you want me to come and work with your team, and then send you out a proposal, and we get started.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. Hopefully, I know the listeners of this episode would have got heaps of value. So I really appreciate you sharing and jumping on as a guest. It's been great.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for inviting me. And I look forward to meeting in real face-to-face time over that cuppa very soon.
Yes, agreed. Thanks for joining in and listening to this episode of Catching the Octopus podcast. It's been great having you here. And if you'd like to go and like and subscribe, and maybe even leave a 5-star rating if you think it's worth it, I'd really appreciate it. I look forward to seeing you in our next episode.